Rain hammers down on the downtown streets, collecting in shiny pools that reflect blurred neon from nearby buildings. Jessica stands under the canopy of O'Malley's bar, checking her phone for a rideshare. She's later leaving than planned, her hair slightly damp from the storm, shoulders hunched against the rain. Jessica's rideshare app pings, driver Kevin, Ite, 2 minutes. She glances at the driver photo. The face looks ordinary, brown hair, neutral smile. She scrolls the profile details. A small sedan, 4 stars, no recent reviews. Her anxiety eases slightly. A dark sedan pulls up to the curb with headlights cutting through the downpour. Jessica rushes over, umbrella forgotten in her bag. She slides into the back seat. A quick glance at the driver's license displayed near the dashboard confirms the name Kevin. She notices the photo is slightly different, but assumes it's just an older picture. Kevin greets her quietly. The interior smells faintly of stale coffee and air freshener. Jessica fumbles with her seatbelt, noticing the driver's stiff posture. The car merges into traffic, windshield wipers thudding in an uneven rhythm. Jessica texts her roommate Sarah about heading home. As they move deeper into the city, Jessica notices Kevin skipping a turn she usually takes to get home. She asks if he's following the GPS route. He murmurs something about avoiding traffic, but keeps his eyes on the road. Outside, the rain intensifies, and the glow of street lamps becomes sparse. After several minutes, Jessica grows uneasy. This route feels wrong. She peers at Kevin's in-car GPS, seeing it constantly recalculate, but the screen appears too dim to read. She tries to speak again, but he only nods without real response. Tension fills as she sees near-empty streets bordered by dark lots. Suddenly, Kevin turns onto a narrow, unlit road. Jessica feels a spike of alarm and insists, "This isn't the right way at all." She looks at the app on her phone, but the signal flickers and the map fails to update. The car's engine hum is the only sound besides the relentless rain pelting the roof. The sedan comes to a jarring stop on a deserted stretch. Kevin cuts the engine. Jessica's pulse races. She demands to know what's happening. In the rearview mirror, Kevin's eyes are cold. Without warning, he lunges between the seats, grabbing her arm with surprising force. Her scream mixes with the howling wind. She tumbles out onto wet gravel. Kevin steps out too. The last thing she sees is his silhouette against the headlights before everything goes dark. By morning, Jessica's phone sits in a puddle beside the open car door. The battery dead, rain still dripping onto the seats. Jessica's roommate, Sarah, wakes to an empty apartment. She texts Jessica, but gets no reply. Calls go straight to voicemail. Worried, she checks the rideshare app to confirm Jessica's trip ended. The app only shows a partial route, miles away from their apartment. Concerned, Sarah contacts the police to file a missing person report. Detective Miller is assigned to the case. She's methodical, known for meticulous work on missing persons. She reviews Jessica's social media, her text messages, and talks to coworkers from her office job. No signs of trouble. Jessica was well-liked. Sarah shares Jessica's ex-boyfriend Mark's number, but says they split amicably months ago. Miller notes Mark as a possible lead anyway. Days later, a jogger finds Jessica's purse discarded near a wooded trail. The contents are soaked. Her ID is inside. Police expand their search to the area. They discover fresh tire tracks that match a sedan. Local wildlife has disturbed the ground, but the investigators see signs suggesting a struggle happened nearby. A forensic sweep uncovers a phone case matching Jessica's. No phone inside. Investigators find footprints, likely a man's shoe, leading off the trail. It vanishes near a gravel road that intersects with a highway. By the time the scene is secured, local news cameras arrive, fueling public fear about rideshare safety. Detective Miller interviews Mark, Jessica's ex-boyfriend. He appears shocked by the news of her disappearance. He states he was at home the night it happened, but can't produce anyone who can confirm it. Miller also probes whether Jessica had conflicts at work. A few coworkers mention a man named Todd, who seemed overly interested in her, but nothing overtly hostile. Sarah shares that Jessica also confided she felt uneasy around a longtime neighbor. The neighbor had once left a note on Jessica's door, complimenting her singing voice at odd hours. Jessica hadn't taken it too seriously, but it was unsettling enough to mention. Miller logs the neighbor's name for follow-up. Within the same week, the battered sedan is discovered abandoned behind an old factory. The license plates are missing and the VIN appears filed off. Inside, investigators find water damage, muddy footprints, and a single strand of long hair. It could match Jessica's, but testing takes time. The trunk is suspiciously clean, wiped down with a strong chemical smell. Detective Miller digs deeper into the rideshare account named Kevin. Records show the profile was created only 2 weeks prior, using a prepaid credit card and a fake driver's license. The app's background check shows no red flags, implying someone used false identification. The trail leads nowhere, an elaborate setup that suggests planning. When pressed, the rideshare company can only provide partial GPS logs. The final recorded location is near the warehouse district. The data ends abruptly, as though the driver disabled the app or the phone. Miller wonders if this was a crime of opportunity or if Jessica was singled out. Public concern grows. The media runs headlines about the vanishing passenger and the suspicious driver. People speculate on social media about possible suspects: an ex-boyfriend with a grudge, a coworker with unrequited feelings, or a random predator exploiting the anonymity of rideshare apps. Tensions rise as the search intensifies. Detective Miller faces mounting pressure. She tracks down Todd, the coworker rumored to have shown interest in Jessica. He's defensive, claiming he barely knew her outside of the office. He provides bank receipts, placing him at a different location on the night of Jessica's disappearance. Miller checks the timestamps. His alibi seems legitimate, but she keeps him on a watch list. Miller also speaks with the neighbor who left that odd note. He appears surprised by her questions, denies wrongdoing, and shows old receipts indicating he was out of town the week Jessica vanished. He suggests the detective talk to local bar patrons who might have seen something suspicious that night. Multiple suspects remain, but no one stands out as conclusive. Evidence from the abandoned sedan's interior returns. The hair is confirmed to be Jessica's, and a partial fingerprint on the inside window doesn't match any existing records. This heightens the theory that the driver used a false identity or had no prior convictions. The missing link is the real identity behind Kevin. Late at night, Miller studies every lead pinned to her investigation board. Photos of Mark, Todd, the neighbor, and the unknown driver fill the wall. Rain taps against the station's windows, echoing the night Jessica vanished. Miller senses the truth is there, hidden in overlooked details. She braces herself for a complex, possibly dangerous chase ahead. Detective Miller starts the day examining new leads about Jessica's personal life. A coworker mentions Jessica had a planned trip with an ex-classmate named Danielle, but she canceled at the last minute. Miller wonders if Jessica was avoiding something. She wonders if Danielle might know more about any threat in Jessica's life. Sarah, Jessica's roommate, confirms that these messages bothered Jessica. She once joked about finding a new place if the harassment continued. Now Sarah regrets not taking it more seriously. She gives Miller Jessica's old phone records, revealing multiple calls to an unidentified burner number. The detective wonders if Kevin's rideshare phone is linked. Detective Miller hunts down Bryce's social media. She finds a series of messages referencing Jessica. Some are praising her looks, others lean toward obsessive. Bryce's account is full of cryptic posts about untrustworthy people and fake identities. Miller sees parallels between these rants and the idea of someone posing as a rideshare driver. Lab results confirm the chemical smell in the sedan's trunk is from an industrial cleaner used in some car washes. Detectives check local businesses. Surveillance from one car wash shows a figure wearing a hood, cleaning a dark sedan late at night, just days after Jessica vanished. The footage is grainy. No clear face. Miller wonders if the hooded person could be Bryce or someone else altogether. At the same time, Miller receives a call from a detective in a neighboring town about a similar incident. A woman reported that her driver took an odd detour and acted strangely, though she managed to escape. The suspect's description is vague, matching multiple possible men. Brown hair, average build. This new victim identifies a car that might be the same dark sedan. Suspects multiply. Mark, Todd, the odd neighbor, Bryce, and now an unidentified second suspect from the next town's incident. Miller wonders if there's a connection or if multiple predators are exploiting the same method. She calls a briefing with her team, laying out each suspect's timeline and known movements. That evening, Sarah finds a postcard slipped under her door. It's blank except for the words, "Stop asking questions." She rushes to show it to Miller. The detective sees it as a direct threat to the investigation. The postmark is smudged, providing no clear lead. Fear creeps deeper into the case. Detective Miller wonders if the SUV driver was an accomplice or another suspect entirely. She compiles the shipping yard witness statement, the partial ID from the car wash footage, and the earlier phone threats. A pattern emerges suggesting someone orchestrated the rideshare ruse. Jessica might have been targeted, not a random victim. Miller revisits Mark, pressing about any associates who drive an SUV. He mentions his older brother David, who owns a gray SUV but claims they rarely speak. The detective sees tension in Mark's face when David's name comes up. She logs David as a potential suspect, especially after confirming the brother has a history of unpaid debts and minor offenses. A search of David's background reveals he recently lost his job and was evicted from his apartment. He also has past associations with a known scam artist who specialized in falsifying driver's licenses. Miller suspects David might have helped create the fake Kevin profile, using Mark's connection to Jessica as leverage. Tensions soar when a fisherman discovers a body in a river on the city outskirts. The victim is confirmed to be Jessica. The news shocks the community. Sarah collapses in grief. Police cordon off the area for forensic analysis. Evidence suggests foul play, but the coroner notes no immediate sign of a single suspect's MO. It looks staged or rushed. A break arrives when a store clerk reports seeing David buying a burner phone a week before Jessica disappeared. The store's CCTV shows him with an unidentified associate wearing a baseball cap pulled low. It's not Mark. The footage is too grainy to confirm Bryce or Todd. The clerk remembers them whispering about the job and the girl. Late one evening, Mark is brought in for further questioning. Confronted with phone logs, he breaks down. He confesses David pressured him to gather information on Jessica's schedule and talk about her usual routes. Mark insists he never knew David intended actual harm. He thought it was just to scare her, or force a meeting. Pressured by Mark's confession, authorities race to find David. They believe Redwood is the ultimate mastermind, but only David can confirm Redwood's identity. Meanwhile, the city reels from Jessica's tragic fate. Sarah demands justice at a press conference, her voice shaking. Detective Miller silently promises she won't stop until the real reason behind Jessica's murder is brought to light. Just as Miller leaves the station that night, she receives a text from an unknown number. "Leave this alone or there'll be another." It's accompanied by a photo of the detective's own car parked outside. The message is clear. Redwood or someone close to him is watching. Miller alerts her superiors, and protection is increased around Sarah. Tension spikes. Before dawn, Miller gathers her notes on Redwood, David's involvement, and Mark's partial confession. She suspects Redwood's network extends beyond local petty crimes. The final showdown looms. She sets a plan in motion to flush David out and corner Redwood. With multiple suspects still lurking, the case balances on a knife's edge, ready to fall into place or collapse entirely. Detective Miller receives a tip about David's possible location at a motel on the city outskirts. She quickly assembles a small team and heads there. The manager recalls a man fitting David's description, but says he left in a hurry that morning. Miller searches the room and finds a crumpled note reading, "Meet Redwood, 8 p.m. Riverside." At the station, Miller's team prepares an operation at Riverside, a neglected area along the river. Additional officers stake out vantage points. Sarah is placed under protective watch. Mark remains in custody for his complicity, providing any detail he can about David's habits. Meanwhile, Redwood remains a shadowy presence, unseen but clearly in control. Moments later, a second vehicle pulls up. A tall figure steps out, face obscured by a cap. David hands him an envelope. Suddenly, the suspect spots an undercover officer's reflection in a window and bolts. Shouting erupts. David tries to run as well, but stumbles. Police converge, flashlights bobbing in the dark. The tall figure disappears behind a warehouse, ignoring commands to stop. Back at headquarters, Detective Miller questions David for hours. He admits Redwood demanded proof of collateral, so David staged the rideshare account, using his criminal contact to get a fake license. He forced Mark to talk to Jessica, ensuring she'd rely on a late-night ride. David claims Redwood was the one who eventually decided Jessica had become a liability. Mark, in custody, is shocked to learn Redwood orchestrated a full-scale scheme. He admits he suspected David was up to something bad, but never imagined it was kidnapping and murder. Mark's face is etched with regret when he realizes Jessica's final trust in him, answering his friendly texts, sealed her fate. News of Redwood's involvement rattles the city. Rumors emerge of other possible victims, other manipulated debtors forced to commit crimes. Redwood's name circulates among local criminals, many of whom fear him. The police coordinate with neighboring jurisdictions to track him down. Sarah, though devastated, hopes Jessica's death might bring Redwood to justice and prevent future tragedies. A final sting operation is organized. Miller and a tactical team descend on the remote cabin at dawn. Redwood attempts to flee through the dense woods, but is apprehended by K-9 units. Inside the cabin, they find evidence linking him to multiple blackmail and kidnapping schemes, including notes referencing Jessica's abduction. The case is finally cracked wide open. At the station, Redwood remains silent during questioning, offering no remorse. The digital records and David's testimony speak for themselves. Redwood is charged with orchestrating Jessica's kidnapping and murder to settle David's debt. The final puzzle piece is in place. Redwood exploited multiple people's desperation to execute a carefully planned crime. Jessica's funeral draws a somber crowd. Friends, family, and sympathetic residents gather to pay respects. Sarah clings to a small photo of them together, tears sliding down her cheeks. The pastor speaks about the tragic circumstances. In the background, Detective Miller stands quietly, feeling both sorrow and relief that the culprits are finally identified. In the following months, Redwood's trial becomes a media spectacle. David testifies in exchange for a plea deal. Mark provides additional insight into how Redwood and David manipulated him. The judge hears how Redwood systematically preyed on those in debt, forcing them into violent acts. The harsh reality of Jessica's final days is laid bare for the jury. In a dramatic conclusion, Redwood is found guilty of kidnapping and murder, among other charges. David is sentenced for his role but avoids a life sentence due to cooperation. Mark faces reduced charges, though he won't escape prison time. The city breathes a collective sigh of relief as the man behind the rideshare horror is taken away in handcuffs. Local rideshare companies implement stricter ID verification and enhanced driver background checks. The public reacts by being more cautious, double-checking license plates and verifying driver photos. Jessica's story becomes a cautionary tale, featured in news segments discussing safe travel. Though the city tries to move on, the memory of her final ride lingers. Sarah struggles with her loss, eventually deciding to move out of the apartment she shared with Jessica. While packing, she discovers Jessica's old camera. Flicking through the memory card, she sees photos from happier times, small everyday moments that feel priceless now. She sets one aside to frame, tears in her eyes. Detective Miller finishes her final report on the case. The paperwork is thick, documenting each twist and suspect. She reflects on how many different people were questioned, how many leads led to dead ends, and how multiple suspects were considered before Redwood emerged as the true threat. She closes the file, satisfied that justice, though delayed, was served. In the aftermath, Mark writes apology letters from prison to Jessica's family and to Sarah. He explains how David's threats and Redwood's looming presence pushed him to betray her trust. Some believe him, others see him as equally culpable. Regardless, he grapples with the guilt daily, haunted by Jessica's final text messages he never responded to. Todd, the co-worker, and the neighbor who left Jessica that note each reflect on how close suspicion came to them. They quietly resume their lives, a lingering unease reminding them of how quickly circumstances can turn. Bryce, too, is relieved to be cleared, but the ordeal changed him. He deletes his old posts, hoping to avoid ever being a suspect again. A memorial is set up near the site where Jessica's body was found. Flowers, pictures, and heartfelt notes accumulate, many from strangers moved by her fate. Sarah visits often, leaving fresh flowers in the water's edge. She stands there thinking about Jessica's laughter, her kindness, and how one ride share changed everything. Detective Miller steps back into O'Malley's bar one last time. The staff nod in recognition. She orders a coffee, scanning the very booth Jessica once occupied. The city's nightlife carries on, with new safety posters and apps that verify drivers. The detective takes a moment to remember Jessica's face before heading back into the rain-soaked street. Jessica's story ends in tragedy, but it propels changes in the city's rideshare practices and reminds everyone to stay vigilant. Multiple suspects were investigated, each leading to David and the ruthless Redwood. Though the outcome is bittersweet, it stands as a lesson about how easily trust can be exploited. In the hush after the storm, her memory lingers, reminding people never to dismiss small doubts and to always take care when stepping into a stranger's car. In the weeks following the trial, local support groups form for rideshare users, offering advice on verification steps and personal safety. Jessica's roommate spearheads a small initiative to educate college students on safe traveling. Her photo is pinned to a bulletin board in campus hallways, a silent reminder of what can happen when caution falls short. Life gradually returns to normal, but the memory of Jessica's case remains. Her name is mentioned whenever someone hesitates to accept a late-night ride. The city, once carefree about rideshare apps, now moves forward with heightened awareness. Jessica's final journey became a catalyst for change, forging a legacy of caution that keeps others safe. Detective Miller stands at the station's bulletin board. She removes old suspect photos, Todd, Bryce, the neighbor, labeling them cleared. David's and Redwood's photos stay pinned under convicted. Jessica's picture is displayed in memoriam. The detective sets the final updated file into storage, the weight of the case still heavy on her mind. A soft rain begins as she leaves, reminiscent of the night it all started. The streetlights flicker on, reflecting off puddles in a gentle glow. In that subdued, rainy light, Detective Miller silently reaffirms the promise she made to every victim. No matter how many suspects or how tangled the plot, she will chase the truth until it's found. Jessica's story proves that determination can bring justice, even if it arrives too late.